It was July 5th, and I found myself on US soil, a country I hadn't visited in a good while. I was traveling to the Midwest region of the United States, which was known for its sprawling landscapes and its famous steakhouses. I was visiting one of the cities in Utah, a state that was well known for its natural beauty and outdoor activities. As I was driving through the state, I couldn't help but admire the breathtaking views of the desert landscape and the towering mountains that were visible in the distance. As I made my way further into the state, I started to hear whispers and rumors about a mysterious house that was rumored to be in the woods somewhere. The locals called it the Joy of Creation House, and they claimed that there were strange entities that lived in it and roamed the surrounding area at night. The stories about the house and its inhabitants were varied and often contradictory. Some people claimed that the house was haunted and that the entities inside were ghosts or spirits. Others claimed that the entities were actually aliens or supernatural creatures. Regardless of the truth, there was no denying that the rumors intrigued me and sparked my curiosity. I knew that the house itself was in a remote and difficult to locate location, so I wasn't sure if I would actually be able to find it. But the idea of discovering the truth about the rumors and perhaps encountering the strange entities intrigued me, and I was determined to try and uncover the truth about the Joy of Creation House. As I continued on my journey, I decided that I was going to try and find the Joy of Creation House that night. I had heard that the entities in the house were more active at night, so I thought that it would be a good idea to go and try to locate the house once it got dark. Before heading out to find the house, I made sure to bring some supplies and a few weapons to protect myself. Along with a flashlight and some other essentials, I made sure to bring my trusty rifle and my Glock handgun, just in case anything tried to attack me while I was exploring the area. Since I had a few hours to kill before it got darker outside, I headed back to my hotel room and spent the afternoon relaxing and preparing for my expedition. I checked and loaded my weapons, made sure that my supplies were in order, and tried to rest and conserve my energy for the night ahead. While I was relaxing at the hotel, I turned on the TV and watched gameplay of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, specifically the level called Clean House. The game was really well made, and I was particularly impressed by the mod that changed the point of view to a body cam, giving a more immersive and realistic experience. In the level Clean House, my team and I raided a townhouse in London to find more information about a notorious terrorist called Omar, nicknamed the Wolf. The level was intense and challenging, as my team and I had to work together to clear each room of the building and neutralize any threats we encountered. We had to be stealthy and quick, making sure to keep our cool and stay focused on the task at hand. Despite the danger and the high stakes, I really enjoyed the level and thought it was a great way to pass the time before my expedition to the Joy of Creation House. I was particularly impressed by the body cam mod that was used in the gameplay I was watching. The mod made the graphics and textures look incredibly realistic, giving the game a much more immersive and cinematic feel. It was almost like watching a real-life military operation unfold before my eyes, and it added an extra layer of excitement and intrigue to the already thrilling level. The mod also made the sound design more immersive, with the gunshot sounds and other audio effects sounding much more authentic and realistic. It was like being transported into the world of the game, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of adrenaline and excitement as I watched the gameplay. After watching gameplay for a while, I decided to order some food for dinner. I called the room service and ordered a burger and fries, figuring that a greasy, satisfying meal would help me feel energized and ready for my expedition later that night. As I waited for my food to arrive, I continued watching the gameplay, relishing the intense action and the realistic graphics and sounds. Finally, there was a knock at the door, and room service delivered my burger and fries. I thanked the waiter and carried the food over to the small table in my room, eager to dig in and satisfy my hunger. The burger was cooked just the way I like it, with a juicy patty and melted cheese, and the fries were crispy and salty. I savored every bite, feeling my energy and strength return as I refueled for the evening ahead. I thoroughly enjoyed the meal, savoring every bite of the juicy burger and crispy fries. The food was just the fuel I needed to get me through the night ahead. I washed everything down with a cold drink, then took a moment to rest and let my food settle. I glanced at the clock and saw that it was almost 11 p.m. It was time. I stood up from the table and finished getting ready. I grabbed my rifle and pistol, making sure they were fully loaded and in good condition. I also grabbed my flashlight and other supplies, preparing myself for the trek through the woods and whatever I might encounter at the Joy of Creation house. I grabbed my key card and left my hotel room, heading through the lobby and out the front door to where my green Hummer was parked. I got into the driver's seat and fired up the engine, feeling the adrenaline start to pump through my veins as I prepared to embark on my expedition to the Joy of Creation house. I pulled out of the hotel parking lot and onto the main road, the city lights shining all around me. The night was warm and humid, and I could feel the sweat trickling down my forehead as I navigated the streets and made my way out of the city towards the outskirts and the beginning of the woods where the house was rumored to be. I continued to drive south on the main road, the city lights slowly fading away behind me and the darkness of the woods creeping closer. The road was mostly empty at this hour, with only a few passing cars and trucks. The night was quiet, and the silence was only occasionally broken by the sound of my Hummer's engine and the sound of crickets in the tall grass on the sides of the road. The main road continued to snake its way deep into a dense forest, the trees and bushes getting thicker and taller as I drove further from the city. The night was dark and the visibility was low, but I had my headlights on and I could see just enough of the road to continue driving. The silence of the night was almost eerie, and I couldn't help but feel a little on edge as I journeyed further into the unknown. As I continued further into the forest, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the same forest that the Joy of Creation house was rumored to be in. I kept an eye out for any signs of the house or any other strange or unusual markings, but so far, all I could see was the endless sea of trees and the darkness of the night. The road continued straight through the forest, the trees and bushes forming a dense wall on either side of the road. The night was still, and the road was deserted. The only sound the hum of my Hummer's engine, and the occasional rustle of leaves in the night breeze. As I kept driving down the main road, I suddenly came upon a dirt road that veered off to the side, lit up with lamps on wooden poles on either side of the path. I felt a pang of excitement in my chest as I saw the pathway. It was a definite clue that I was on the right track. I slowed my Hummer to a stop next to the turning, studying the path. I looked at the dirt path that stretched deep into the woods. It was dimly lit by the lamps on either side of the turning, but the path itself was full of shadows and darkness. There was no doubt that this was probably the same path that led to the Joy of Creation house, but I couldn't be sure. Either way, I knew that I had to follow it and see where it led. I took a deep breath and turned onto the dirt road, my Hummer's wheels crunching on the gravel as I drove slowly down the path. The path was narrower than the main road, and the tall trees and bushes loomed over me on either side, their shadows dancing in the glow of the lamps. I could feel my heart beating a little faster as I drove further into the unknown. I continued to drive slowly down the dirt path, my eyes darting back and forth as I kept a sharp lookout for any signs of the Joy of Creation house or any other clues that would give away its location. The silence of the night was deafening, the only sound the hum of my Hummer's engine and the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. I couldn't help but feel a little unnerved by the atmosphere, but I kept driving, determined to find the house and uncover the truth about the entities rumored to live in it. After a few more minutes of driving down the dirt path, I finally came upon the house that I had been searching for, the Joy of Creation house. But instead of the old and run-down place that I was expecting, it looked like a completely normal, well-maintained suburban house standing in a clearing surrounded by the dense forest. I was surprised to see the Joy of Creation house look so normal and well-kept, given all the wild rumors and stories I had heard about it. I stopped my Hummer and sat there for a few minutes, just staring at the house, feeling a mix of curiosity and trepidation. This was definitely not what I was expecting, and I had a feeling that there was something more to this house than met the eye. I sat in my Hummer for a few more minutes, watching the house and taking in the eerie atmosphere. The lights were off, giving the place a sinister and ominous feeling, like something was lurking in the shadows, watching me from within the house. I was about to reach into my pocket to get a cigar, as I often do when I'm on a mission and feel a bit stressed. But then I remembered that I had quit smoking. I had decided to stop smoking for good because it was bad for my health and was also expensive, and I had done a pretty good of it. So I just sat there in the Hummer for a little bit, trying to calm my nerves without the help of a cigar. I took a bite of a protein bar and washed it down with a mouthful of water, which was something I had started doing recently instead of smoking a cigar. It was a healthier way to get myself ready for a mission, and it also helped me stay hydrated and fueled up for whatever lay ahead. I grabbed my rifle and Glock, making sure they were fully loaded and ready to go. Then I put on my hat and tactical gloves, feeling the familiar weight of the weapons in my hands and getting my mind into soldier mode. I glanced over at the Joy of Creation house once more, its dark windows staring back at me like soulless eyes. I took a deep breath, mentally preparing myself for what was about to happen. My heart was racing, my mind clear and focused. I was as ready as I could be to enter the house and encounter whoever or whatever waited inside. I quietly got out of the Hummer, making sure to close the door softly so as not to make any unnecessary noise. I stood for a moment, taking one last look at the dark woods and the silent house. I knew that once I entered, there was no turning back. I was about to enter the unknown, and I had no idea what kind of horrors or secrets lay within. I walked up to the front door of the house, my rifle clutched tightly in my hands and my senses on high alert. The door looked normal, just like the rest of the house, but I knew that appearances could be deceiving. I took a deep breath, mentally preparing myself for what might be waiting on the other side of the door, and reached out to grab the handle. As I touched the handle, I paused for a moment, my heart beating loudly in my chest. I could feel my adrenaline pumping, my muscles tensing up in anticipation. I didn't know what lay on the other side of this door, but I was about to find out. I slowly opened the door and stepped inside, finding myself in a small corridor that was dimly lit by the soft glow of 3 sconce lamps. The faint sound of jazz music floated through the air, coming from a radio that sat on a shelf. The music had a slow, soothing rhythm that sounded like it was from a jazz club in the 1940s. It was strangely relaxing and unexpected, considering the creepy reputation of the house. I looked around, taking in my surroundings. The corridor seemed normal enough, no signs of anything unusual or unnatural. But I knew that appearances could be deceiving, and I wasn't lowering my guard just yet. The house was eerily quiet, and the soft jazz music only served to make the atmosphere more unnerving. I continued down the corridor, the sconce lamps casting shadows on the walls. I reached the corner and turned it, coming upon a door that led into the main... I continued down the corridor, the sconce lamps casting shadows on the walls. I reached the corner and turned it, coming upon a door that led into the main part of the house. I paused for a moment, listening for any signs of movement or noise from behind the door, but all I could hear was the soft jazz music and the sound of my own breathing. I took a deep breath, mentally preparing myself for what I might find on the other side of the door. My hand trembled slightly as I reached out to grab the handle, but I steadied myself and pushed open the door. I entered the main part of the house and was immediately hit by the darkness. I couldn't see much in the dim light, but I could see that the main part of the house was divided into different hallways and rooms. I walked down the hallway in front of me, my footsteps echoing softly on the wooden floorboards. The house was eerily quiet, but I could feel a sense of anticipation building up inside of me as I moved further into the dark and unknown interior of the house. The hallways were mostly dark, lit only by sparse lamps that cast eerie shadows on the walls. The thunderstorm that had rolled in added to the atmosphere, making it more harrowing and unsettling. With each step I took, my nerves grew more tense, my mind spinning with 100 different thoughts and possibilities. I continued to make my way down multiple different hallways, my rifle constantly aimed ahead of me. The house was like a maze, with hallway after hallway leading to new and unfamiliar rooms and corridors. I tried to keep my cool and stay vigilant, knowing that something could jump out at me at any moment. The house was still eerily quiet around me, and the only sound was the faint thunder rumbling in the distance and the occasional creak of the floorboards under my feet. I kept walking, my senses on high alert as I approached a junction in the hallways. I paused at the junction, trying to decide which hallway to go down. The house was still dark and quiet, but I had a feeling that I wasn't alone. I could feel an unseen presence watching me, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I strained my ears, listening for any signs of movement or breathing. All I could hear was the sound of the thunder in the distance, and the soft creaks of the floorboards as I shifted my weight. I knew I had to keep moving, but the feeling of being watched was making me more and more uneasy. With a firm grip on my rifle, I chose the hallway to my right and continued down it, my eyes darting back and forth as I scanned the darkness for any signs of movement. The hallways seemed endless, and I was starting to lose my sense of direction. As I turned corner after corner, the silence of the house seemed to get even more oppressive and foreboding. I started to wonder if I was even going in the right direction, or if I was just wandering in circles in the labyrinth of dark hallways. The house felt more and more like a huge square labyrinth as I continued to walk through the darkness. The majority of the house seemed to be made up of endless hallways and corridors, with rare, large rooms here and there. The maze-like arrangement was confusing and disorienting, and I felt like I was walking in circles with no way out. Suddenly, I hear loud metal footsteps coming from around the corner up ahead. My heart skipped a beat, and my grip tightened on my rifle as I slowly approached the corner, my senses on high alert. The footsteps sounded heavy and ominous, like something big and metallic was moving around the corner. I slowly peeked around the corner, my heart racing, and saw a figure walking in the hallway up ahead. At first I couldn't quite make out what it was, but as it came closer, I realized that it was an animatronic bear. Its metal body moved with a strange, unnatural grace, and I could hear the whir of servos and machinery as it walked. The animatronic bear was wearing a small top hat and a black bow tie, but was strangely missing its lower jaw, hands, and one of its ears. It seemed like it had been damaged or tampered with, giving it a strange, eerie appearance. Realization dawned on me as I looked at the damaged animatronics. It was Freddy Fazbear, but the ignited version from the Joy of Creation game. The burned and battered metal body, the missing parts, it all fit the description of the animatronics from the game. I knew that this was not a normal animatronic, but a dangerous and hostile entity. I quickly pulled back from the corner and pressed myself against the wall, trying to keep as quiet as possible. I could hear the footsteps of Freddy getting closer, my heart beating faster and faster with every step. I quietly backed away from the corner, trying to put as much distance between me and Freddy as possible. I could hear his footsteps getting closer, his metal body groaning and creaking as he lumbered down the hallway. I turned and quickly moved down another hallway, my heart racing and my mind going a mile a minute. As I continued down the hallway, my mind started to race. If Freddy was here, then that meant that his friends, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, must be somewhere in the house too. The idea of encountering all four of the animatronics filled me with dread and unease. I couldn't let them catch me, or I was a goner. I continued through the house, moving as quickly as I could while still remaining quiet. The idea of encountering the other three animatronics filled me with dread. Every corner and every shadow seemed like it could be hiding one of them, waiting to pounce on me at any moment. I kept my rifle raised and my eyes scanning the dark halls for any signs of movement. The house seemed endless, and the feeling of being trapped in the maze-like corridors was overwhelming. I felt like I was going in circles, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being stalked by the animatronics. Every creak and groan of the floorboards under my feet made me jump, my paranoia growing with every passing second. I continued moving through the house, trying to find a way out or a safe place to hide. I knew it was only a matter of time before I encountered one of the animatronics. I could feel their presence closing in on me. The sound of their footsteps or their mechanical groans getting closer and closer with every step I took. Suddenly, Freddy came around the corner, his damaged body silhouetted in the dim light. His lifeless eyes locked onto me, and I could hear his mechanical groans getting louder as he started to move towards me. Panic washed over me as Freddy spotted me and started running after me. I broke into a run, my heart racing and my mind spinning with fear. The heavy footsteps of Freddy echoed behind me as he pursued me down the corridor, his metal body creaking and groaning with each step. I turned corner after corner, desperately trying to shake Freddy off my tail. The house seemed to become a maze of indistinguishable corridors, and I could hear the sound of Freddy's footsteps getting closer and closer with each step I took. I knew that I couldn't run forever, and that I had to find a way to lose him soon. The panic and fear drove me forward, my feet moving as fast as I could manage. But no matter how many turns I took, or how hard I ran, Freddy seemed to be right on my tail. I could hear the sound of his footsteps getting louder and louder, and I knew that he was closing in on me. I turned around and fired my rifle at Freddy, the sound of the gunshot echoing through the halls. The shots hit Freddy's metal body, making a loud dent and causing him to stagger back a few steps. I knew that my rifle shots had only slowed Freddy down for a moment, but I took the opportunity to turn and run down the hallway as fast as I could. I could hear Freddy roaring in anger as he started to give chase once again, his footsteps growing louder and more menacing as he got closer. I kept my eyes on the hallway ahead of me, darting through the maze of corridors as I desperately tried to lose Freddy. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I pushed myself to run faster and faster. I turned around once more and aimed my rifle at Freddy's head, firing off another series of shots. The shots hit their mark, causing Freddy's head to jerk back and sparks to fly from his damaged body. One of the shots from my rifle pierced through Freddy's face, the impact causing a loud and ugly dent in his face and damaging it so badly that it was rendered almost unrecognizable. Freddy let out a loud, guttural roar of pain as my shots damaged his face and body. The animatronic stumbled back, his body twitching and sparks flying from his damaged parts before shutting down with a final loud groan. I stood there, breathing heavily and still holding onto my rifle tightly, watching as Freddy went limp and lay motionless on the floor. The house was suddenly quiet again, the only sounds being the distant thunder and my own heavy breathing. I kept my rifle raised and trained on Freddy's motionless body, waiting for a moment to make sure the animatroid stayed down and wasn't going to get back up. The sight of Freddy lying there, his mangled body and damaged face, made a chill run down my spine. But after a few moments, it became clear that Freddy wasn't going anywhere. He lay motionless, his body twitching slightly every now and then, but otherwise completely inert. I slowly lowered my rifle, taking a deep breath and trying to steady my still racing heart. I had survived my encounter with Freddy, but I knew that the other animatronics could be lurking anywhere in the dark hallways of the house. I couldn't let my guard down, not yet. I had to keep moving and find a way out of this place before it was too late. I took a moment to catch my breath and calm myself before continuing on. I slowly walked down the hallway, keeping my rifle raised and my senses on high alert. The darkness seemed to close in on me, and every shadow seemed like it could be hiding an animatronic waiting to pounce. I continued down the hallway until I came across a door that was partially open. I slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside, bracing myself for whatever was waiting on the other side. I opened the door and saw a stairway leading down, with a faint light at the end which provided some illumination. My heart raced as I considered which way to go. Continue searching through the unknown halls, or proceed down the stairway into the darkness. I reached the bottom of the stairway and found myself in the basement. The space was dimly lit by a few lights scattered around, casting shadows on the walls and floor. The air was cold and musty, and I could hear the distant sound of the storm raging outside. I began to explore the basement, my steps quiet and cautious on the cold concrete floor. I wondered if one of Freddy's friends, like Chica or Bonnie, were hiding down here in the darkness, waiting to jump out at me. As I walked down the basement hallways, I began to notice that this basement had a similar layout and labyrinthine design as the first floor where I had encountered Freddy. The labyrinth seemed to go on and on, hallway after hallway, with doors and rooms along the way. The thought of encountering another animatronic down here, in the dark and confined space of the basement, filled me with dread and unease. I was starting to feel like I was trapped, surrounded by endless corridors and ominous doors, with no way out or safe place in sight. I continued walking and noticed that the halls of the basement were lit up by old-fashioned lanterns on the walls. The dim, flickering light from the lanterns cast strange shadows on the walls and floor, adding to the feeling of eerie uncertainty that I was feeling. My footsteps echoed loudly on the concrete floor, and I could feel the cold, damp air on my skin. The only other sounds were the distant hum of electricity and the occasional creak of the lanterns on the walls. I kept my rifle at the ready as I walked through the hallway, my eyes constantly scanning the shadows for any signs of movement. I continued walking, my senses on high alert. Every shadow seemed to hold a potential threat. Every sound made me flinch. The labyrinth of hallways and doors seemed endless, and I started to wonder if I was going in circles or if I was actually making any progress. I heard the same metal footsteps again, coming from somewhere nearby. This time, they sounded like they were moving at a quicker pace, as if whoever was making the noise was on the move and in a hurry. I gripped my rifle tighter as I heard the footsteps growing closer and closer, my heart racing and my mind spinning with 100 different thoughts and possibilities. What was making the noise? Was it Freddy, one of his friends, or something completely different and sinister? I carefully peeked around the corner and saw Bonnie, the rabbit animatronic, standing in the hallway. But this was no ordinary Bonnie. He was in his ignited version, with his face and right arm missing, and his torso suit torn and ripped, revealing his metallic endoskeleton. It was a strange sight. Bonnie looked like he had been working out. His metallic endoskeleton was exposed in places where his suit had been torn, showing off a strangely muscular build that made him look like he had been pumping iron in the gym. I watched as Bonnie walked by and down another hall, disappearing into the maze of corridors and rooms. I breathed a sigh of relief, thankful that he hadn't spotted me, but at the same time feeling a twinge of unease, knowing that he was somewhere out there in the darkness. I quickly headed down another hall, moving in the opposite direction of where Bonnie had gone. I kept my rifle raised and my eyes peeled, constantly searching for any signs of movement or threats in the darkness. As I turned the corner and continued down the hallway, I realized how much it was starting to feel like a maze. The endless corridors and doors all looked the same, and I started to feel like I was walking in circles with no sign of a way out or a safe place in sight. The sound of my own footsteps echoed faintly in the corridors, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every now and then, I would hear a creak or a groan from the floorboards, or the walls, making me jump and raising the hair on the back of my neck. The basement seemed to go on, and the feeling of hopelessness and futility started to settle in. I didn't know how long I had been down here, how much further I had to go, or if there was even a way out. All I knew was that I had to keep moving, had to keep searching for a way out of this nightmare. As I continued walking, the thought crossed my mind of what a collaboration between the creators of Call of Duty and Nixon, the creator of the Joy of Creation, might be like. I couldn't help but envision a game where the military gets involved to investigate the Joy of Creation house and neutralize any threats like the ignited animatronics. The mashup of military-style gameplay and the horror elements of the FNAF world really seemed like a recipe for a unique and exciting experience. I turned down another hallway, still holding my rifle at the ready. The hallway was dark and dimly lit, and I could see shadows shifting and moving in the distance, making me feel like I was being watched and stalked by something sinister. I continued down the hallway, my senses on high alert. Every shadow, every flicker of light, every sound made me jump and startle, my mind racing with every possible worst-case scenario. The maze of corridors seemed endless and unforgiving, and I started to wonder if I would ever find a way out, or if I was doomed to wander this house forever. Just as I was lost in thought, Bonnie suddenly came around the corner, his ignited form looming in the dim light. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest as I raised my rifle and trained it on the animatronic rabbit. Bonnie suddenly let out a roar and charged at me. Acting on pure instinct, I raised my rifle and fired off a burst of shots. The impact of the bullets knocked Bonnie back for a second, but the animatronic was tough and quickly recovered, continuing his charge towards me. I fired off another burst of shots from my rifle, the bullets hitting Bonnie and causing more damage. But the animatronic kept coming, undeterred and focused on attacking me. I aimed my rifle and fired again, this time targeting Bonnie's endoskeleton face. The impact of the bullet caused the animatronic's face to explode in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. Bonnie stumbled back, clearly badly damaged and hindered by the loss of his face. Bonnie stumbled backwards and collapsed onto the floor, his body twitching and sparking before finally powered off. The animatronic lay motionless on the ground, his once terrifying presence now a mere broken mass of metal and wires. I lowered my rifle and took a moment to catch my breath, my heart still racing from the intense encounter. I couldn't believe that I had survived another encounter with an ignited animatronic, let alone managed to take Bonnie down. With one animatronic down, I had to wonder how many more I would have to face. I knew that Freddy was down here somewhere, and there was still the possibility of Chica and Foxy. The thought of encountering any more of them filled me with a sense of both dread and determination. Suddenly, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a weather warning notification saying that the storm outside was getting dangerously strong and that I needed to leave and get back to the hotel. My heart skipped a beat as I realized that the storm was getting even worse and that I needed to get out of here as fast as I could. I quickly decided that I had to abandon searching for Chica and Foxy. I had heard from my friend Ghostface that he was coming to the US on vacation on Friday for a couple of weeks, and that he would handle them. I didn't know what he had planned or what he was capable of, but it was a relief to know that I wouldn't have to face those two dangerous animatronics alone. I quickly began rushing through the basement, frantically searching for the stairs that would take me back upstairs. The labyrinth of corridors and doors seemed to go on, and I felt like I was lost in a maze that had no exit. My only option was to keep moving forward and hope that I would eventually find my way out of this house of terror. I turned corner after corner, desperately trying to find the way out of this basement and back into the relative safety of the main area of the house. The storm outside continued to rage, and the thought of being trapped down here in the dark made me feel increasingly anxious and uneasy. I continued searching through the labyrinth of corridors, but it seemed like I was going in circles and getting nowhere. The feeling of hopelessness and helplessness intensified, and I could feel the walls closing in on me like a prison. After what felt like an eternity of searching, I finally stumbled upon the stairs that led to a way out of the basement. A wave of relief washed over me as I quickly began ascending the steps, glad to be getting out of that suffocating dark place. As I reached the top of the stairs and stepped into the main area of the house once more, I felt like I could breathe again. The air up here was still cold and damp, but it was a welcome relief from the oppressive atmosphere in the basement. I quickly ran through the main floor of the house, passing by the lifeless body of Freddy, who was still motionless on the floor. Seeing the animatronic in his disabled state made me feel a sense of pride and accomplishment, knowing that I had survived yet again. I continued moving through the house, searching for a way out. The storm continued to rage outside, and the wind was picking up, making the whole house creak and groan. I knew that I had to find an exit fast, before the storm caused any more damage or made it even more difficult to escape. As I hurried through the halls, I couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. The storm was getting worse, and the thought of the animatronic still lurking somewhere made me feel on edge and vulnerable. I knew that I had to make a break for it and get out of this nightmare as soon as possible. I bolted out the main door and sprinted towards my green Hummer, which was parked outside. The storm was lashing at me with rain and wind, but I barely noticed, focused only on reaching the safety of the vehicle. I quickly reached the Hummer and climbed inside, grateful to be out of the storm and somewhat shielded from the elements. As I sat behind the wheel, I took a moment to catch my breath and try to calm my racing heart. The house loomed behind me, menacing and ominous in the storm. I started the engine of the Hummer and turned on the headlights, casting a beam of light into the shadows and rain. With a final look behind me at the house, I put the vehicle in gear and pulled away, driving away from the haunted house that had brought me nothing but danger and terror. I drove down the dirt road, the headlights of the Hummer cutting through the darkness and rain. The storm continued to rage, but I felt safer in the protection of the vehicle. I eventually made it back to the main road and started driving towards civilization once again. The drive back to civilization was long and treacherous, and the storm made the road slick and dangerous. The Hummer struggled to navigate the slippery terrain, and I had to focus intently on keeping the vehicle on the road and out of trouble. Every now and then, a particularly strong gust of wind would rock the vehicle, making me wince and grip the steering wheel tighter. After driving through the seemingly endless woodland for a while, I finally began to emerge into the open fields, the headlights of my Hummer revealing the large expanse of farmland in the darkness. The wide open countryside was a stark contrast to the ominous woods I had just left behind, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief at seeing something other than trees and shadows. The storm continued to rage, but the fields seemed a little less hostile than the woods. As I continued driving back towards town, I suddenly realized how hungry I was. Unfortunately, with the storm being as bad as it was, all the late-night restaurants were likely closed. I cursed silently as my stomach rumbled, knowing that I'd have to find something to eat as soon as possible. My eyes lit up as I spotted a drive-through fast food restaurant that was somehow still open despite the storm. Perhaps they had a night shift that didn't mind working during the bad weather. Either way, I was just happy to have a place to get some food. I quickly pulled into the drive-through lane, the tires of the Hummer splashing through puddles of water from the rain. The bright neon lights from the restaurant seemed like a haven in the dark, stormy night. I quickly placed my order, my stomach growling as I requested a huge amount of food. I ordered 4 chicken sandwiches, 5 wings, 5 tenders, 6 fries, 4 onion rings, 4 tacos, and 8 salads, along with 8 protein shakes. I knew it was quite a large order, but I couldn't help myself, as I was extremely hungry and also very strict about staying healthy, especially given my military background. To my surprise and relief, the total came to only 15. I had expected it to be much more given the amount of food I had ordered, but somehow, everything added up to a very reasonable amount. I quickly handed over the money and received my food. I quickly sped off, the bags of food on the passenger seat beside me. The storm was still raging, but I wasn't bothered by it anymore now that I had food. I was desperate to get back to the hotel and get some rest after such a long, eventful night. I quickly parked the Hummer in the hotel's parking lot and dashed out of the vehicle, eager to get out of the storm and into the warmth and comfort of the hotel. The rain soaked me quickly as I sprinted towards the entrance, the bags of food tightly held in my hands. I made my way down the dimly lit hallway and finally reached the door to my room. I quickly unlocked the door and stepped inside, shutting the door behind me and breathing a sigh of relief as I was safely out of the storm. I dropped the bags of food on the table and flopped down onto the bed, exhausted from the night's events. I placed my hat on the nightstand before getting changed out of my military uniform and into a pair of comfortable pajamas. Once I was dressed, I started unpacking the bags of food, my mouth watering as the aroma filled the room. I started off with a chicken sandwich, paired with some onion rings. The food was hot and freshly prepared, and it tasted like heaven after the long, stressful night I had. I let out a satisfied sigh as I took a bite, feeling my hunger being slowly satiated. After devouring the sandwich and onion rings, I moved on to the tenders and fries. The crispy tenders were perfectly cooked, and the fries were salted to perfection, making them the perfect accompaniment to the meal. I continued eating, my taste buds dancing with delight at the flavors exploding in my mouth. Next, I moved on to the wings. The meaty and juicy wings were cooked just right, with a crispy skin and a tender, flavorful flesh. I devoured them in no time, savoring every bite and licking my fingers clean of the spicy sauce that came with them. I then reached for the tacos, which were filled with seasoned meat and fresh vegetables. The crunch of the tortilla combined with the juicy filling made for a delicious and satisfying meal. I quickly finished the tacos, hungry for more food. Next were the salads, which were a healthy addition to the meal. The crisp lettuce, colorful vegetables, and light dressing provided a refreshing counterpoint to the heavy and greasy in eating. Next were the salads, which were a healthy addition to the meal. The crisp lettuce, colorful vegetables, and light dressing provided a refreshing counterpoint to the heavy and greasy foods I had been eating. I finished the salads quickly, feeling a sense of satisfaction at the balance of healthy and indulgent food. Finally, I sipped on the protein shakes, which provided me with a cold and smooth drink to wash everything down. The protein in the shakes helped to supplement my diet and support my active lifestyle. I finished the drinks, feeling fully satisfied, but also looking forward to having leftovers for breakfast. With a full stomach and a satisfied smile, I got ready for bed. I brushed my teeth, finished my nightly routine, and climbed into the soft, comfortable bed. I turned off the lights and closed my eyes, feeling my body relax and my mind drifting off to sleep. As I laid in bed, my thoughts of the night's events came rushing back to me. I felt a sense of pride and satisfaction in uncovering the truth behind the Joy of Creation house, and in surviving yet another encounter with the ignited animatronics. I thought about Ghostface, and how he had no idea what he was in for when he got back to town. I knew that he was skilled and fearless, but the ignited animatronics were dangerous and unpredictable. I silently wished him good luck, knowing that he had a difficult task ahead of him. As I lay in bed, I thought about my friend Ghostface and how I needed to warn him about the ignited animatronics. I made a mental note to call him in the morning to give him a heads up about what he was likely to encounter when he arrived back in the US. With that thought in mind, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to drift off to sleep, my mind still swirling with images of the house and the animatronics. I hoped that I would dream peacefully and wake up in the morning feeling well rested and ready for the day ahead.